Hi guys, welcome to the second episode of The End of the Line. Today I'm going to show you how to tie a rig that I've had so much success with last season, and that rig is the multi-rig. The multi-rig is a devastating rig and it's so easy to tie, and I'm going to show you how to do that in this video. You'll also need a kettle, but I'll explain that later on in the video. Okay, so the first thing that I do when I'm tying my multi-rig is I get my coated braid. And then what I do is I take a small amount, I then get a swivel. I pass the line through the swivel, then what I do is I make a loop, I make the loop like so, and then I just pass the swivel through the loop, pull it tight. Put a small amount of spit on that. And I pull on all of it to make sure that it's all nice and bedded down. I'll snip off the tag end. And as you can see, the swivel is now secured in the loop. Now the good thing about this loop is that not only is it securing our swivel in place, but it's also acting as an anti-tangle boom, helping to push the rig away from the lead. Okay, so the next thing that I do is I take the required amount of braid off. Now obviously this is dependent on circumstances, it depends on what type of rig I'm fishing, what type of lead setup I'm using, but it's generally somewhere between 6 and 10 inches. So I get that and I cut it off. Simple as. Okay. So the next thing that I do is I now have a piece of line with a loop in the middle and a swivel on the end. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to tie another loop. Now the size of this loop is dependent on what type of lake bed you're fishing on. For example, if you're fishing on say gravel and you want the fish to feed fairly close to the deck, then you make a small loop so that your pop-up didn't sit too high up off the ground. Or you may well be fishing on top of like leaf debris or whatever, and in that instance you might make a big loop so that your pop-up is sitting quite high off the bottom. So I'm going to go for sort of like an inch loop here. I want it to sit fairly close to the deck in this instance. Now this is where your splicing needle comes in handy, because obviously you want to try and keep this nice and short and neat. So use the splicing needle to actually pass the braid through itself. Just makes it nice and easy to tie the rig. Famous last words. Okay, so as it's bedding down, it's becoming a bit taller. Put some spit on it. Again, always make sure you lubricate all your knots. I put a puller in there. I pull that down tight. Pull on all of it to make it nice and tight. So now we've got one loop, another loop, and a swivel. Now snip off the tag end. The next thing to do in this rig is to strip back a small amount of the coating just behind the knot. Now, people use stripping tools. I can never find one that I get on particularly well with. I just like to use my teeth, but I don't recommend it if you end up breaking your teeth and you want to get me sued because you've got a massive dentist bill. Okay, as you can see, that creates a bit of a hinged effect on the rig. Just creates that hinge just there. So the next thing to do is to steam your hook link straight. Now, obviously, this straight section is very important because when you've got a counterbalance bait and it's sinking through the water, landing on the deck, that boom section will actually act as a kicker and just push it out of the lead and make sure that it's nice and straight and it's fishing correctly. Now you can use a kettle to steam it, and in most instances I would, but what I'm going to do is, worst case scenario, you're on the bank, you want to tie a multi-rig, you ain't got a kettle. So you get your puller, you put it either side of the loop, and then you just pull nice and tight. And then what I do then is I just hang one puller, I just run my fingers down. You can use your fingers, just get some heat going through that braid, and that will just help straighten everything out. You should have a fairly straight rig there now. As you can see, it's nice and stiff, but it's also straight. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to attach our hook. So to attach our hook, take the loop, then we pass it through the front of the eye of the hook. Now pay attention to the curvature of the braid because this is important. Take your rig screw, put it on your loop, and then pass the loop back over the hook. Now pull the hook up, create a nice D in the rig. And what this D does is this D really helps to, helps to create a hooking property of the rig, puts a nice curvature in the rig itself, and just helps everything work really. But like I said before, you need to take note of the curvature of the braid before you put it through the hook so that you've got a nice curve there. So the next thing to do is to attach our pop-up. The final thing to do when you're doing this rig is to apply your putty. Now I use the Christ Heavy Metal Extra. It sticks really well, and it's really heavy as well, so it really does help your rig sink down just as you want it to. The first thing I do is I get a small amount of putty and I put that in the middle of the boom section, and what that does, that just helps to pin the rig down when it's all casted out and it's all fishing. Just roll it up into a nice little barrel. There you have it. So there's my little bit that just helps everything sink down nice. The next thing to do is to attach a small amount of putty to your knot on your loop side. The good thing about the knot is that it does act as an anchor for your putty isn't going to go anywhere, so you just keep on putting little bits of putty around your knot until you know that your bait's just going to sink nice and slowly. Measure it in the margins, just see how you're getting on, add a little bit more, take a little bit off. You want it to just settle slowly. So now to explain the mechanics of the rig. Now obviously the first thing to note is that you've got the big loop on the swivel side. This creates a nice kicker for when you're casting out, and then make sure that your rig never tangles on the cast, because your lead is going to come down and your pop-up is going to stay hovering. Then when your lead hits the deck, that kicker will make that kick out, and your pop-up will just slowly sink because you've just put enough weight on to counterbalance the hook. It will just flutter down slowly, and because this section is stiff, it will kick the pop-up out, so you always know that your pop-up is going to be fishing on the bottom. Like so. Now this rig's really effective. It's done me a lot of fish this last season. I mean, I had that big one out of the syndicate that you saw. I caught one of the fish out of horseshoe on it because that was the only fish that I caught at night. I caught a fish out of Hardwick, and to be fair, every run that I've had I've connected with. The only time that I had a problem with it was once I did get done at Hardwick. Could have had 2 fish for that video, but I ended up with the one. But yeah, it's devastating. It's a really good rig, and it's really good in the fact that once you've casted it out, you know that it's fishing effectively all the time. If a fish picks your bait up and drops it again, it's just going to flutter back down. When you wind it in, you can see if you've been done, because the D gets pulled up by the hook and creates, you know, it looks something like this if you've been done. So there you go, guys. That's how you tie the multi-rig. I really suggest giving it a go if you're looking for a rig. If you're feeling a bit unconfident in what you're using at the moment and you fancy trying to give something else a go, don't go going for anything super complicated. Give this a try first, because it did me plenty of bites last year. It's a really good rig, and keeping it simple is definitely the key to success. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please leave us a like down below, and if you've got any questions, put them in the comments section. You know, I always want to hear from you guys. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and until next week, tight lines.